his wife saying that he has a book of Hitler's speeches by the counter of his bed. They go and ask Donald Trump who gave him the book. Trump hesitates and then says, well, actually, my Jewish friend gave me a copy of Mein Kampf. They then go to the friend, and the friend confirms that they did give him a book about Hitler, which was a book about Hitler's speeches, but it wasn't even Mein Kampf. So maybe Trump actually, on top of the book of Hitler's speeches, also has a copy of Mein Kampf. And then he says, if I had these speeches, and I'm not saying that I do, I would never read them, which just makes no sense. And so instead, he just goes into mega defense mode and says, yes, I have all these Hitler books, but the Jews gave them to me. So you can't get at me. You got to go talk to the Jews, because the Jews were the people who were actually telling me about Hitler. And then reports come out after his presidency, in this new book, that he was praising Hitler. I wanted to talk about this article, because this article and the reports from a new book are so off the wall that I have to report on it. And you know what? As one of those lefties who wants to get the ching-ching, right? I have to talk about every breathing move that Donald Trump makes. Trump praised Hitler to Chief of Staff John Kelly during a trip to Europe, a new book claims. These comments would have been made in around 2018 while he was in Europe. And I'm very curious. I'm super curious to exactly what extent were these praises of Hitler. Donald Trump, while serving as president, once praised Nazi leader Adolf Hitler during a conversation with then White House Chief of Staff General John Kelly, a new book claims. Well, Hitler did a lot of good things, Trump told Kelly during a 2018 visit to Europe to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I, according to the book. President Trump never said this. It is made up fake news, probably by a general who was incompetent and was then fired, Trump's spokeswoman said. If there's anyone I trust on what Trump has and hasn't said, it would be as Trump's spokeswoman. Donald Trump, while serving as president, once praised Nazi leader Adolf Hitler during a conversation with then White House Chief of Staff John Kelly, a new book claims. I want to know what book it is exactly. That doesn't tell me what the book is. Where's the book? It doesn't even tell. Instead of a link to the book, it just links me to a different, well, whatever. While Hitler did a lot of good things, Trump told Kelly during a 2018 official visit to Europe. Frankly, according to Michael Bender's book, frankly, we did win this election. The Guardian newspaper, which obtained a copy of the book, reported that Trump made the positive comment about Hitler during an impromptu history lesson in which the retired Marine Corps general reminded the president which countries were on which side during the conflict, and described how in the First World War led to the Second World War and all of Hitler's atrocities. Tens of millions of people died in World War II, during which the United States, well, we all know World War II. The report comes more after 30 years of the Vanity Fair magazine cited a claim by Trump's first wife, Ivana Trump, that he kept a book of Hitler's speeches by his bed. Trump, in saying Hitler also did a lot of good things, noted to Kelly that the German economy recovered in the 1930s under the Nazi dictator, according to the Guardian report. But Kelly reportedly said that even if that were true, you cannot ever say anything supportive of Adolf Hitler. You just can't. Trump's spokeswoman, of course, said later it was false. So, Trump denied a prior report about the same trip. He skipped a scheduled visit to an American cemetery near Paris, where he said, where should I go to that cemetery? Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers. Okay, so what do I think about this report? I mean, is it possible that Trump said this? I mean, maybe. This wouldn't be the first time Trump has ever been accused of maybe looking to Hitler for inspiration or knowing a little bit about the big AH, you know? Like this report just said, his first wife has claimed for years, not just in a one-off appearance, but for years, his first wife has claimed that he kept a book of Hitler's speeches by his bed, which I guess he read. I mean, Trump's biggest skill has always been marketing, always been speaking to common people and advertising himself. It wouldn't be that surprising if the guy heard about Hitler and how he how he encapsulated a nation in the palm of his hand through his speaking ability and speeches, and then went and read his books or read some things he put out. It isn't so far to believe. And honestly, I think Trump could be the type of contrarian that when somebody talks about Hitler doing bad things and getting a little history lesson from the chief of staff, he just starts speaking in his defense a little bit. Definitely if he's somebody who's read his speeches before. So while, of course, we don't have audio or footage of anything of that sort, if you were to ask me directly whether I think Trump could have done this, yes. But really, it's like the flip of a coin whether he actually said this. Like, we have no clue. I mean, of course, it is a title catcher. The idea that Donald Trump was praising Adolf Hitler to his chief of staff, where his chief of staff brings up the atrocities of Adolf Hitler, and he says in response, well, what about the economy? That is this type of stuff you hear from alt-righters who talk about Hitler all the time, where they'll bring up the atrocities, and if they can't fight them on Holocaust denial, they'll slide straight into, well, what about the German economy? He did save Germany from the rubble. It was going into economic decay, and he fixed it. Even though Hitler was never really a grand economist. Most of the economic recovery probably came from his ability to bring stability, but really any government could have done that. But it is a mind deal. Oh, God. Mind deal. Yeah, that's going to be the German version. That's going to German release. But yeah, I mean, all I can say about this report really is that it's possible he said it. We have no audio or visual confirmation that he said it. And it's coming from a new book coming out. And the odds of him saying it, in my opinion, are probably 50-50. And it also depends on how much you trust the author of this book to give you unbiased, unslanted information. Let's read the rest of the article first, then. Trump then said, when Vanity Fair reporter asked Trump himself if Trump's cousin had given them the book. Wait. When Vanity Fair reporter asked Trump himself if Trump's cousin had given them that book, the magazine reported that Trump hesitated. Who told you that? Trump asked, according to the magazine. Trump then said, actually, it was my friend Marty Davis from Paramount who gave me a copy of Mein Kampf, and he's a Jew. Davis told Vanity Fair, I did give him a book about Hitler, but it was My New Order, Hitler Speeches, not Mein Kampf. I thought he would find it interesting, Davis said. I am his friend, but I'm not Jewish. Trump told the magazine, if I had these speeches, and I'm not saying that I do, I would never read them. So what we have is his wife saying that he has a book of Hitler's speeches by the counter of his bed. They go and ask Donald Trump who gave him the book. Trump hesitates and then says, well, actually, my Jewish friend gave me a copy of Mein Kampf. They then go to the friend, and the friend confirms that they did give him a book about Hitler, which was a book about Hitler's speeches, but it wasn't even Mein Kampf. So maybe Trump actually, on top of the book of Hitler's speeches, also has a copy of Mein Kampf. And then he says, if I had these speeches, and I'm not saying that I do, I would never read them, which just makes no sense. So it seems that there's two people confirming that he has a book of Hitler's speeches. Trump seems to semi-confirm it, but then also slips up and possibly reveals that he might also have a version of Mein Kampf. And he claims that the person who gave him the book of Hitler's speeches / Mein Kampf was Jewish. Then they go to the person and he says, I am Donald Trump's friend, but I'm not a Jew. What? I'm not Jewish. And so that's Trump actively trying to cover his ass because he knows how having a copy of Mein Kampf or a book of Hitler's speeches would look bad. He could have easily, if you would have asked me, do I have a book of Hitler's speeches? My answer would be no. But I do have books that are pretty controversial. And if you would have asked me about, for example, I have a copy of the Israel Lobby, which I don't agree with a lot of the conclusions that book made. And if anybody was to ask me why I had a copy of it, I would say, well, I like to hear different opinions and like to cross-reference them and see if I can, maybe tear apart the book or hear from different perspectives. And I can say that. But for Trump, he couldn't let that out, maybe. Or say I just was enamored by his speaking ability or anything like that. And so instead, he just goes in the mega defense mode and says, yes, I have all these Hitler books, but the Jews gave them to me. So you can't get at me. You got to go talk to the Jews, because the Jews were the people who would actually tell me about Hitler. And then reports come out after his presidency in this new book that he was praising Hitler to the White House Chief of Staff at the time while learning about the First and Second World War while on a tour of Europe in 2018. I forgot about the full story behind the book on how it was from two sources and not his wife, and so now the odds in my head of him actually saying this just went from 50% to 70%. I forgot that it was that elaborate, that his wife then says that he has the book. They go to Trump. Trump basically confirms it while accidentally possibly slipping out that he might also have a copy of Mein Kampf, tells them where he got it, tells them that a Jew gave it to him, goes to the person. The person says, I did give it to him. Second person confirmed. Well, this is the third person if you include Trump. Third person confirms he has his book of Hitler speeches, but then says he didn't give him a copy of Mein Kampf and he's not Jewish. And then years later, while president, there's now this book coming out saying that he was praising Hitler to the White House Chief of Staff. It's not that hard to believe. I'm not saying that Trump bought into all of Hitler's ideology, but with somebody who possibly looks like it was more and more likely that he was reading Hitler's speeches and possibly Mein Kampf and was really hesitant to really admit it and wanted to cover up with the idea of it was the Jews who actually gave me this book. It was the Jews who were trying to get me on the Hitler scene, okay? I was not hip to the Hitler man until the Jews gave me the book. I'm leaning a lot more towards, now remembering the full story, I'm leaning a lot more towards he probably did praise Hitler while getting a history lesson in World War II. And if you are the type of person that when Hitler comes up in conversation and someone says, yeah, Hitler was a bad guy, he did some evil things, you just launch into, well, let's talk about Hitler's Germany's economic situation before Hitler and after Hitler. Not really good. By the way, let's say that you disagree with me and that you think Hitler did produce a German economic miracle. Let's say you did actually disagree with me on that and you believe that for whatever reason. You have to acknowledge that Germany funneling all these monies in the foreign wars to the huge extent it did until your country's literally almost wiped off the face of the planet due to carpet bombing is not good economics. Provoking your neighbors and invading your neighbors until a few years later, Allied bombing campaigns wipe out all your factories is actually not good economic policy. In fact, I would go forward be a little forward and say actually it's bad economic policy. So the German economic miracle ended up being German factories literally being blown to smithereens. Anyway, this report of Hitler not Hitler praising Trump. Hey, that would be a wild report of Trump praising Hitler is just another chapter in the strange political story of Donald J. Trump. And one that if you would ask me now that I finished reading the article, it's actually pretty likely. They bombed Germany out of envy of their stellar economy. Maybe that's the case. Maybe that's what the whole war was about after all. You want a good book on how Germany's supposed economic miracle was actually built on a foundation of sand? Read Wages of Destruction. If Germany was successful in the war, you would be saying something else. Entering a war is a gamble, and World War II turned out to be a huge economic boom to the United States. Well, yeah, but if you lose the war, then the war was a bad economic policy. That's quite simple. If your economy is based off of war and conquest, it's not that surprising that when you start losing the war, your economy goes under. That's not like complicated like mental math there. I gotta jump through some hoops to do that. Like if you bomb countries and steal all their paintings and steal all this gold and conquer and that's how you maintain the German war machine. And then that stops happening in 1942, in the winter of 1943 is when it really stops. Then it's not going to be a huge surprise when the bank vaults start emptying. Not to mention, a lot of the German economy is also built on literal slavery. Slavery of the Jewish, the people, the homosexuals, and political dissidents. So not only was the economy built on war and conquest, which of course went south when they stopped conquering, it was also built on slavery. So the German economy was not really the economic miracle that a lot of people lead you to believe. If Hitler kept the economy afloat, especially the war economy, through slavery and conquest, point blank period. So even if we were to try to give this the most honest, the most charitable interpretation and say maybe Trump just has a real deep interest of the German economy between 1933 to 1945 and nothing else when commenting on Hitler's economy. Once the topic of Hitler comes up in casual conversation during the 100th anniversary of the First World War, while on a tour of Europe, the worst place to make this statement, to the chief of staff of your administration, he was even wrong on the merits of what he was saying. Unless, of course, he wanted to unless he thinks a economy supported by slavery and conquest is a good economy. Be quite honest, I'm afraid to hear the answer to that question. Oh boy, son of a cod just permitted the term Aryans in chat. That's fun. That's real fun. So how casually does Hitler come up in conversation? Well, apparently with Donald Trump, it's come out but few times. More than many of us would like to admit, apparently. Jesus Christ. That's enough of that.